To all of you, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us again on our last conference day on Friday, day 5 of the Transport and Climate Change Week. It's a pleasure to have you on board, so thanks for tuning in. It is the Transport and Climate Change Week in its 4th edition, organized by the GIZ on behalf of the Federal Ministry of the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety. And of course, as you all know, we are live streaming here from the Global Hub in Berlin, but of course you are joining us from more than 13 different time zones and watching us worldwide. So thanks again for joining us. My name is Katie Gallas. I'm a geographer and a foreign journalist, and I'm pleased to be your moderator for today again. I could say it's been a very exciting week following along the hashtag Transport Week 21 and Change Transport. I could really dive into your thoughts, into your discussion, and into the different sessions. So thanks again for being so engaged and having this digital firework in the digital media. It is really a platform to gather and to network. Please be continuously engaged on our platform. Use the chat for your thoughts. Use the wall of ideas. Of course, also use the matchmaking area, because this is really the place where you can network with the like-minded souls that also burn and have this passion, this drive for transport and climate change. And of course, also the virtual fair where you can gather for getting more information about all the organizing partners and to reach them directly by exchanging your business cards and maybe, setting up a calendar note to actually continue the deep dive and the debate. Thanks again for joining us, and of course, thanks for posting on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and all the digital media, as I just mentioned. Hashtag of the day, of course, today is also Transport Week 21 and Change Transport. Coming into our first session of today, we are going to talk about the success and the increasing ambitions when we talk about transport and climate change. We talk with high-level representatives of the governments of Germany, of France, and the European Union on how the lessons of the 5 years of successful implementation can be rapidly scaled to meet the global challenges of the moment, and of course, in these times that we are living in. I warmly welcome for her welcoming remarks now Eleonore François-Jacobs, Partnerships and Outreach Manager at the MobiliseYourCity Secretariat. So Eleonore, thanks for joining us et bienvenue.
Thank you, Katie. So I'm actually joining here from MobiliseYourCity Global Secretariat in Brussels, and I would like to thank all of the speakers who are here today, and in particular thank our partners BMU and GIZ for giving us the opportunity to host this first MobiliseYourCity Global Forum. It's really a pleasure to have all of you here. For those of you who don't know about MobiliseYourCity, let me introduce very briefly who we are and why we believe in transforming urban mobility to help shape more sustainable and just. As you know, mobility connects us to each other and to places we want to go. But the way we move today is not sustainable. It's not working for most people or the planet. We've heard this week from many actors taking action to transform mobility and make it more sustainable. But the demand is high and the time is short to shape sustainable cities for the future. So MobiliseYourCity was launched at COP21 in Paris with 15 partners and 15 million. It began as an initiative to support cities and countries in addressing these local challenges with global impacts. And today, we have nearly 100 partners throughout the world and 40 million euros from the European Union and the governments of France and Germany. We prepare sustainable urban mobility plans, we ensure access to finance, and we build capacities on the way. So far, with the first 10 projects completed, we have mobilized nearly €1 billion for sustainable mobility. We expect these projects to reduce over 35 megatons CO2 equivalent emissions by 2030 and to reduce emissions by 20% at the local level. But beyond these clear environmental impacts that we anticipate, the question is, how do we work to ensure a just transition? So the MobiliseYourCity partnership works, for instance, on the integration of informal transport to create better jobs and make cities more livable. We've been encouraged by our success, and we see more cities and countries joining MobiliseYourCity. Our partnership really shows what is possible when we act collectively and with urgency. So today, for the first time, we're bringing together our partners from across the world in one single event. We will welcome an amazing mix of local and national government representatives from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. We will have finance and climate experts as well as decision makers joining us. And together, they will engage in high-level panel discussion and hands-on training on sustainable mobility's most important issues. We will talk about digitalization, access to finance, vertical integration, or the integration of parts. I hope you enjoy this exciting program we have prepared and that you find here some answers to the challenges you might be facing on the way to sustainable mobility. Again, thank you all for joining this global forum. I will now leave the floor to our partners who can best talk about what they're doing to transform mobility. Back to you, Katie.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, and greetings to Brussels. Thanks for joining us, for your welcome remarks and for this outlook of today. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start with a short introduction of our panel guests now. I do have in the studio, and I'm very pleased because, of course, in these times, it is not a common thing. We debate a lot digitally and virtually, but nevertheless, some studio guests are allowed to come into with highly hygiene regulations. So with me is Norbert Gorißen. A warm welcome to you, Head of the International Policy Directorate at the Federal Environment Ministry. And up to 2018, Mr. Gorißen was responsible for developing the International Climate Initiative with more than 500 ongoing projects in over 18 developing countries. So Norbert Gorißen, a warm welcome to you. Thanks for joining us this morning for the Climate and Transport Change Week. Transport and Climate Change Week. Next to me and in the middle of us, Vera Scholz. A warm welcome to you. Good morning, Vera Scholz, Head of Division Climate Change, Environment and Infrastructure within the GIZ. And Vera's areas of expertise are climate change, management of natural resources and infrastructure. Glad to have you on board for this discussion. And digitally, a warm welcome to Paolo Ciccarelli. He is specialized in development cooperation in both the private and also the public sector. He has lived and worked in Somalia, Nigeria, Uganda, and Zambia, just to name a few, and he's the head of Unit F4, Sustainable Transport and Urban Development at the European Commission. So thanks for joining us, and a warm welcome also to you, Paolo. And last but not least, Lise Breuil, Head of Transport and Mobility Division at the Agence Française de Développement. This division really supports and finances development projects focusing on urban mobility, national connectivity and participation in international trade. So Lise Breuil, bienvenue and merci for joining us today, this morning.
Thank you.
I hope you can understand us well. Thanks for joining us again. So I'd like to start with a first round of small opening remarks, and I'd like to start with you, Mr. Gorißen, from the ministry, coming from the Ministry of Environment, which has been supporting the Mobilize Your City now for 5 years now and still continuing. You also, of course, supported this conference week, so of course, a big thanks to you also. Could you tell us why, again, from your perspective with your framework, why urban mobility is important when we talk about climate and the climate perspective? So how to connect the dots?
Thank you, Katie, and thanks for inviting me, and thanks for the organizers for creating this big event. Very happy to be here. I would like to start really with the global perspective. So what we are discussing now is the climate crisis, which which most of us, I guess, know about a lot and feeling already with the changes of our weather patterns every day, with increasing catastrophes, droughts and heat waves and storms, and that's increasing all over the world. And so it has become very clear, meanwhile, that we have to limit temperature increase up to not more than 1.5 degrees. That is a new benchmark, which is already agreed by G7 leaders only 2 weeks ago. And in order to get there, which is much more ambitious than what we have agreed initially in Paris, we need to act now, and the coming decade is absolutely decisive, because the aim is to be at net zero by 2050. And developing countries have to follow that very soon thereafter. They may have a little bit more time, but the second half of the century, we all need to be climate neutral. What we did in Germany is very exciting exactly these days, because after groundbreaking decision of our Constitutional Court, our climate bill was amended, and it was already adopted last night by the first chamber, and today it will be adopted by the second chamber, and then it's binding. And it will put us on a pathway to be climate neutral by 2045, legally binding, and it will increase targets in the time up to 2045, and in particular by 2030 we want to reduce emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, by 65%. And what is interesting for this perspective, for the transport week, is we have sectoral targets included in this bill. And for transport, it means transport sector has to reduce its emissions 43% up to 2030. And we know that that transport in city contributes about 20 to 30%, depending a little bit on the circumstances and the country. So we see all over the world increasing urbanization, rising demand for transport, rising emissions. And so it's very clear, if we talk about 1.5 keeping in reach, if we talk about climate neutrality, transport has to contribute, and also transport in cities has to contribute to that. And cities have been very active, I must say, over the last years. So a number of networks have been created, city networks, which are working on their own activities on climate. Citizens in cities sometimes are more active. Mayors are also sometimes more active than on higher levels, because cities is where people can really feel the politics, and where the decisions are made and have a direct impact on the day-to-day life. And transport also here plays an absolutely crucial part. We believe that transport emissions, to about half of it, have to be reduced by improving the efficiency and the performance and the technology of the vehicles, all vehicles, including vehicles for public transport, and the other part has to be reduced by a different way of how we organize transport, reducing transport and shifting more towards public transport and also non-motorized transport. And that is happening at the core in cities. Cities are seeking and working on solutions. Cities are seeking on working on capacities, and cities are in particular also seeking to get finance for investments, because it's obvious the old solutions, car-centric orientation, investments in flyovers, that wouldn't work. So more advanced city planning is absolutely crucial in order to get that managed. So therefore we are very happy that the German Ministry for Environment, as you said, is supporting Mobilise Your City since 5 years. We have created several initiatives in this space, and Mobilise Your City is one of them. We are promoting with 38 million euros, 38 cities in 10 countries. It has already mobilized additionally 900 million euros for concrete sustainable mobility projects. And we hope that thus cities will contribute to reducing emissions and creating more ambition, which is what we need to get at. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Norbert Gorißen. And I'd like to start with our next speaker in this short opening session. Paolo is with us, EU Director General. International Partnerships has been a key donor of the partnership since its creation, as we all know and heard earlier. Can you tell us, Paolo, about the new global challenges when we talk and debate about urban mobility, and of course how this urban mobility can shape sustainable, smart, and also just cities?
Yes, of course. We know very well what are the challenges of this rapid urbanization and all the challenges that are provoking the congestion, the pollution, the emissions, noise, and of course an increased social exclusion and important, very important, reduce city productivity. So we, as a Commission, we have for the next years to come some priorities that we are very clear in mind: the Green Deal, the digitalization, the jobs creation and economic growth agenda, and the human development. And of course, mobility, or urban mobility, is at the core of all these areas. I would say that a functional mobility system is the backbone of a functioning city, because it connects people to job opportunities and to basic services. And if well planned, they can optimize the social and economic advantages of living in urban areas. And of course, reduce the impact to the environment. So for this reason, we have been supporting this program, Mobilize Your City, because we think that it's very important, the approach that has been taken by this program. First of all, understanding the partners' cities' mobility issues, and then to try to catalyze the coordination between the relevant actors and the institution. It's very important to bring together the national level with the local level in these big challenges. And of course, planning urban mobility with an increased attention to active modes and public transport. Public transport is the key here, because if we have to green the sector, we have to start with the plan greening the public transport. And of course, we have to engage with the local stakeholders into these decarbonization scenarios. And of course, integrate better the public and the private, because even in this model of sustainable mobility, the contribution of the private sector is key. So I have very little time, but basically I would like to say that for us, what is important is to find a very strong coordination for the support that we give at national level, with the support, technical, financial support that we give at national level, and with this kind of more thematic programs that we are, let's say, engaging in different countries. And the other things is that we have to combine not only these efforts that we do at national level with this thematic initiative like Mobilize Your Cities, but the most important thing is to link this to effective finance. We have to Mobilize Your City is a catalyzer for then entering in the financing of big sustainable mobility schemes that we do through our innovative models, financing models, like, for example, blending grants with loans, having guarantees that can support PPPs. So there are all these elements that come to play and need a very strong coordination. I want to say that, to conclude my intervention, that in the new financial framework that goes to 2021 to 2027, the Commission launched the approach of Team Europe. So basically now we will try to coordinate better the work of the Commission with the different EU member states, the different EU agencies and EU financing institutions, to make a kind of combined effort to address all these challenges. I think that in this case, Mobilize Your Cities has been already a precursor, because we have been already working with this with France and Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paolo Ciccarelli. Thank you. And now coming to Lise Breuil, we listened and we've heard, of course, now a lot about challenges. So, Lise, the Agence Française de Développement, of course, is both donor and key implementing partner of Mobilize Your City. Can you give us a glimpse from your perspective on how to actually react and what are the answers to all these challenges that we were just listening to?
Thank you, Katie. And thanks for the organizers to invite us to this first Global Forum. all these challenges that you mentioned previously is first the role of urban mobility to tackle climate change. And of course, the role of transport and urban mobility to shape, I would say, livable cities, not only low carbon cities, but really cities for people. And as Paolo just reminded, this requires the right coalitions of local and national interests to create the adequate framework for planning and for financing. And this requires that as well, both a vision and pragmatism. I would say we need to be dreamers and we need to be doers as well. The vision should be people-centered, should be elaborated in a participative way to define the kind of city we want to live in. And then when it comes to implementation, we have to be pragmatic, see how we can combine big infrastructure, quick wins for the benefits of a mobility system. It's really a system. And when I see what we have achieved since the beginning of these partnerships, I can measure how long way we have come together. And what I would like to say today is that we have first results, just as Eleonore reminded in the beginning, concerning leverage financing and projects that are starting implementation following the partnership first planning. But the partnership has recently adopted a new strategy which precisely addresses such requirement. The idea is to continue the mainstream of activity on mobility planning that was the first pillar and the core of the partnership. And this helps developing this vision and prepare infrastructure projects like BRTs, like bus restructuration, like mass transit. But in addition, and this is where I want to come, we have also identified a sort of gap implementation for a project like walking and cycling, like also the professionalization of paratransit. Paratransit is all the enormous amount of small operators that in fact provide 90% of the transport supply in most of South cities. And these activities require a long-term approach. I would say that it is too small for our usual loans as financial institutions, but it is crucial for the success of any initiative on urban mobility. And so that's where I believe that the partnership MYC can really make a difference in providing hands-on support, thanks to our partners like GIZ, and in producing methodologies, in supporting the exchanges of experiences between cities. And as a financial institution, AFD is very proud to support the partnership and very happy to see how this implementation can be filled. And that's also where we need some financing and more financings to implement this new strategy. And we have started good discussions with colleagues in a number of countries where we could combine some big investment that AFD is financing and some long-term implementation supported by the partnership branded MYC to address such implementation gap. So thanks, Elaine.
Thank you very much, Lise. And of course, thanks for highlighting your main topics. Last but not least, in this opening round, I, of course, warmly welcome now again Vera Scholz again, talking about the implementation of different partnerships, procedures, the GIZ and the Agence Française pour Développement. You both are the two main implementing partners of Mobilize Your City, working really hand in hand now for almost 5 years. Could you tell us a little bit more about this partnership? And of course, talking about commitment, why do you stay committed?
Thank you so much, Kati. And before I start to elaborate on this, it is very, very nice here to be with you, Kati, and also with Norbert Gorißen here in this room together. I think we are really enjoying this, to have a bit of a personal contact. And we are here in the GIZ premises in Berlin and talking about sustainable cities. If you would be here, all of you, you could have a glimpse outside. We have a little lake here in front of our building. There's lots of green, and I think it would be really nice to be able to welcome you all here, but this situation is not as such. I also would like to make a first point. I mean, we are talking about sustainable and not climate friendly only, but climate neutral mobility and cities. And that is not yet mainstream. And I think it is very important to have an initiative and a partnership like Mobilize Your City, which is enabling the pioneers for this agenda under one kind of roof. Yeah? So this is why I'm very, very happy that many years ago Mobilize Your City was invented, formed, and has become a very strong partnership. Kati, you just mentioned, I mean, we are two implementing partners, that is the Agence Française de Développement and also GIZ. And this is a very, very strong and nice partnership because we really can work very complementary together. And I would like to stress we have a joint program which is funded, Paolo, by the European Commission, the Euroclima initiative, Euroclima Plus, where AFD, Agence Française de Développement, and GIZ are jointly implementing the urban mobility component. Yeah, so and this is a program which is happening in Latin America. So this is one example, in addition to Mobilize Your City, where we work together already very closely. To describe a bit, what does that mean, complementary? That means, for example, that we are working as GIZ most often with national governments. Yeah, that means that we advise and work together with national governments to enable them that cities have a role to play in climate change and also especially in sustainable urban mobility. Yeah, so we need the national governments to enable cities to do so. And what is very, very nice that the AFD most often also works at the city level. So this is a good combination between GIZ being active at the national level and AFD being very much engaged with the cities. What is also very important to know, and Lise just mentioned it, the Agence Française de Développement is a financial institution, is a development bank, whereas GIZ is strong on capacity development. Yeah? And I think it is in these times where we are eager to come about a transition because of climate change and many other global challenges, we really have to join forces. And this is why I think it is very important that financial institutions and institutions like GIZ join forces and work together, for example, in the subject of sustainable and climate neutral mobility. And what is also very good about this partnership, that we are together, and not only AFD and GIZ, but as I said, also the national governments and the cities and the citizens, this is also very important, we also can learn together. So working on the ground enables us to improve and to test our tools and methodologies, and also what is good practice to distribute that among this Mobilize Your City partnership. Yeah? So this is one big example and advantage that we can share experiences we are able to make on the ground. A paradigm shift in urban mobility needs to happen to attain sustainability in transport. And this needs to happen by shifting the focus from traffic, from cars and lorries, to people. Because I think we have learned in the last years that it is so important that we have a just transition. And a just transition also looks at people and their well-being. And what we have also learned that it is very, very important to combine the activities of the national government in relation to sustainable urban mobility and the level of the local governments and the cities. We have developed a tool which is called Sustainable Urban Mobility Planning, the SUMS. And we have also seen that it is very nice to have plans, and it is also very nice to have priorities, for example, for cycling and walking lanes, or for strengthening public transport. That is also very important in the framework of our climate agenda, to strengthen public transport. We also see what Lise said, it's very nice to have plans and priorities. It is very nice to advise governments, but it also needs finance. Yeah, so that is very important. I don't know, I have an example, Kati. Shall we do that a little bit later?
We can do the example a little bit later. Yeah, give us.
Okay, good. Then I stop here. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Vera. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, we had now several points, and I have a full paper with different notes, and I would love to start with a buzzword that actually Vera just brought up, a just transition. When we talk, of course, coming to the people, from transport to the people, we need to talk about a just transition, and also Paolo pointed out, it's also about creating new job opportunities. So I'd like to ask our guest from the Ministry, from the Environment Ministry, Norbert Gorißen, what does it mean to have a just transition, to actually also engage new job opportunities for a car nation like Germany it is?
That's a good question, a really challenging question. I think we have some experience with just transition, in particular in the mining sector. We have agreed on phasing out our coal production, coal mining and coal production both, and both comes along with a lot of social questions, structural questions. So you have to work with, in order to get to solutions, you have to work with the regions which are impacted, you have to work with the people who are losing potentially their jobs, and try to find new solutions for that. On the other hand, I must say that's also costly. So the German example, I'm not quite sure whether this is something you can do everywhere, because it comes with a lot of money as compensation for the regions which are impacted, and also for the workers. And if you talk about a car industry, the German society and the German business, car manufacturers don't believe they will run out of their jobs. So they are transitioning their own way of what kind of products they are producing. They are a number of them are very clearly now focusing on electric vehicles. And there will be new opportunities in the case of electric vehicles, which is not that often really fully understood. So the focus is very much on the car manufacturing sites itself, but I think there's more which comes on top of it. Just think about the charging infrastructure, which you have to set up. This involves a lot of new jobs for people who have to construct those things, to install them. That's not directly in the car industry, but it's related to it. So I'm not that worried that the Germany will get a lot of problems with transforming its car industry. If I may, I would like to pick one point which I heard from various of the very interesting interventions from colleagues, from Paolo and from Lise and from Vera, and that is the crucial point of finance. For cities, it's even more difficult to attract finance than for national governments. That's not only true in developing countries, also in developed countries, but it's in particular a challenge for developing countries, for cities there, to attract the finance to do the transformation. And so therefore a focus on how to direct the finance towards the cities is absolutely key. What we have done over the last years, we have set up a fund, a special Cities Climate Gap Fund, which is based in two major development finance institutions, the World Bank and the European Investment Banks, and it's now open for access. So cities can apply there, and they can get little funding, which helps them in particular to prepare for the bigger projects. Once the bigger projects are prepared, then maybe AFD would come in and invest in it, and GIZ will complement it in order to have also complementary planning measures, etc., not just the investment as such. But I just want to highlight that there's a lot of focus necessary, and it's only possible, that also has to be said, if the national governments and the local governments work together. And that was a point which also was made by Vera, which is a big,
Thank you, Norbert Gorißen.
Challenge.
I'd like to play the ball from the finance ball now back to Louise. Would you agree that this is the right path to go to actually reach our goal of a smart and, of course, a just city? And also talking about social cohesion, would you also agree that it's not that problem to actually change everything from now until tomorrow?
So I'm not sure I did understand your question well.
I can repeat it if you'd like to. So we were just tackling on some points concerning the finance. As you're also pointing out, finance is a major topic that we need to talk about, as we cannot print money, of course. And the bike lanes and everything and charging infrastructure needs to be financed. So is it the right path to actually build up a fund, like Norbert Gorißen was just mentioning out? Is that something that you would agree on? And the second question that came up with the previous question, talking about social cohesion, because when we talk about transition, we have to take the people with us. So are we on the right path?
Yeah. I think we are on the right path because, through such a partnership, we are really building the conditions to have good project and framework for financing that combines this national and local level. And we have seen first results. So, I believe that we are on the right path. Regarding social cohesion, there is a specific transition in South cities, which is very different from the transition that was described by Norbert in Germany or maybe in France, is that the transport sector is very much informal and is providing thousands of informal jobs, which are basically operators of minibuses. So there is a very specific approach of urban mobility in such cities, and any as the main objective, not only to improve mobility, but also to improve jobs, to improve road safety, to improve air quality, and again, to have a system that is coherent and livable. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. Yeah, Paolo, I just come back to you now, talking also about finance. So, what would be your priority when we talk about and debate about a successful finance of course, the change that we are all aiming for?
But of course, finance is the key topic because what we have to do is to put together planning. Social dialogue, political dialogue, good practices, but then finance is the important element to implement what we are planning. The Commission has a massive amounts of funds that has been set aside in what we call the European Sustainable Development Fund. We call this plus, because we are giving a lot of weight on the guarantee tool. These guarantees will be used in the next 7 years to make sure that we are de-risking the development intervention. We know very well that the budget we have in the public administration and in the donors, this is not enough to fill the gap of the lack of infrastructure and all other interventions that are needed. So we have to get funds from the private sector. And this is only possible, especially in some countries. I have in mind Sub-Saharan Africa, for example. Getting private sector investing there is only possible if we de-risk the operations. There are very complex, let's say, financial packages that we put together with private-public partnerships, and these are only possible if there is a strong de-risking factor from the European Commission. So, in our guarantee scheme, we have also a specific window for cities, and there we can really help private sector to contribute to the financing of city infrastructure and especially on mobility system. We have already some examples and we are working on it, and not only through Mobilize Your City, but also, of course, with other programs. And I think that putting together, I would say, the logic and the planning of Mobilize Your City with the possibility to invest in urban mobility infrastructure and services, this will be key to solve at least partly some of the problems.
Thank you, Paolo, also for pointing out, of course, the importance of public and private investment. Vera, I'd just like to come back to you, because of course we were also talking about the different stakeholders that we need to discuss with, and you also mentioned the level of the citizens. So maybe you could give us the example and you dive into that, how important that is and where we are on that road towards Beyond Tomorrow. So where are we when we talk about participation?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathi, for this question, because it is very important. We have been working together with AFD in the city of Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, and there it was very important, first of all, to develop a vision for sustainable mobility, in the city of Santo Domingo. And it was very, very important already at the stage of the vision to include the voice of the citizens and different stakeholders and different groups, also low-income groups. And Lise already mentioned, for example, this resulted not only in the vision, but also then it resulted in the fact that we could jointly identify certain measures we wanted to implement. And one is, for example, about the informal transport system, which is so important for many, many people in developing countries and emerging economies. And this is what I think it is a good example when I said, as I said before, we have to shift the focus from the traffic to the people. And this is again, for me, one symbol and how to realize this kind of just transition. It's not easy. You have to discuss with people. You have to involve the different stakeholders. This costs a bit of energy and time, but I think it pays out. And we have been identifying many, many measures which are now also partly already financed. We said it is so important to have finance, and this is it is fostering the public transport system, but also cycling and walking, because there also needs to be space for people who cannot buy a car, but who have to walk and who have to cycle maybe, and that was very encouraging. And to just give you a glimpse from this experience, how will Santo Domingo look like in the year 2030? I mean, compared to 2018, the city will have to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 20%. It will have provided access to public transport to about 33% of the population. In 2018, it was only 10%. And it will have increased the modal share of public transport from 36 in 2018 to 44 in 2030. So this is just one example which is very encouraging, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Vera. Norbert Gorißen, when we talk about, and you just mentioned the climate protection law that came yesterday into German's parliament, net zero emissions now by 2045. So the whole process is, of course, now speeded up. And of course, there are different changing numerous laws and ordinances. So Norbert Gorißen, how would you see Berlin now changing? What would you like to see in a glimpse of the next upcoming 15 years?
I know that, thank you for the question. I know that the city government of Berlin also has quite ambitious plans with respect to energy and climate. You should ask the officials here directly. I'm sure they will provide you with all the details. I know that transport will play a crucial part. I know there is a big activity on electrifying the bus fleet here in Berlin. There's also mobility law, it is called, which gives special rights also for bikes and walking, and that has to be now implemented by the district government. So it's also binding, and there's a clear vision. And I'm quite sure, and I hope that Berlin can set an example here. But it's not only Berlin. In Germany, we have more cities which are on a similar way, and they're working together in city associations like C40, Cities 40, or the Government of Mayors, and I said it in the beginning, those kind of networks are promoting climate action in cities, and promoting climate action in cities always means that a central part of the activity is about transport and mobility, and then we are what we are discussing right now.
Is this the message also to the listeners of Mobilize Your City that you like to share on that last round now, or what would you like to share with the listeners from Mobilize Your City? And of course,
with what? With listeners?
For
Yeah,
the
I think that's what my advice would be. Listening to this conversation and listening here, it would be there's opportunities to strengthening even more than it's already existing the work of city networks working on climate, and the transport community working in cities, which is here. So it would not be useful to organize these as two silos. I'm sure it's not really the case, but I think even strengthen it more would benefit a lot. And then we need also a better cooperation between cities and national governments. They need to support.
I take that to Paolo. Paolo, what is your message, your final message in that round? What are your highest priorities?
I would repeat something that I said maybe very quickly before. A functioning mobility system is the backbone of a functioning cities. You know, in some countries, especially in our partner countries, we have capitals that are producing 70-80% of the GDP and producing maybe up to 90% of the GHG emission. So where all the jobs are created, where most of the social exclusion and inequalities are, we are now the poor, the urban poor. So the message is that we have to concentrate our work in cities. Urban development, urban planning is crucial. And of course, again, to me, is something that we have to have two kind of links. The first link is to connect the national and the local level, very, very important. And the second, we have to connect the reform and the strategies to the implementation modality.
Thank you, Paolo. Make a dot here because, of course, I don't want to forget Lise. So for the last round, please be concrete. What's your highest priority?
Well, I like very much the message of Norbert and Paolo. If I should add something, this is a word, SDGs. I would say that transport and urban mobility is very keen to achieve a lot of SDGs, not only 11, which is sustainable cities, but also access to education, access to health, access to jobs, and of course also transverse issues like gender and climate.
Absolutely. So merci. Merci, Lise. Merci for joining us. Last but not least, Vera.
Thank you so much. My message would be, don't think that the task is too big. Yeah, and it is useless to start it because there are so many challenges. I mean, this is also the experience in Germany. I mean, we started also with, for example, bicycle lanes, yeah? And now we have a discussion in many, many cities in Germany about sustainable mobility and sustainable cities and climate neutral cities. So just get together and start.
Get together and start. And that's exactly what we're doing. Thanks, everybody involved here for this panel discussion.